Hi all, today we're talking about alchemy, in other words, how to alchemize trauma, how to alchemize dark experiences, disillusionment as well as disappointment. We're also looking at what it means to raise your frequency, and we're looking at spiritual bypassing. So let's start with raising your frequency, because this has been something that's very popular in the spiritual community. Keep on high vibe, be high vibe, don't be negative, blah blah blah. Problem with this is a lot of the times it creates spiritual bypassing, and this is due to a fundamental misunderstanding in what being high vibe is, right? So high vibe isn't just being positive and never focusing on the negative, and as not to create, negative experiences. Because I've always, to some extent, believed that the way that we interpret the law of attraction is a pernicious myth, right? It's a pernicious myth because it is basically denial. So we are propagating denial, and it's a form of prosperity religion. If you are positive enough, if you believe it enough, if you make your vision board enough, then you can create a beautiful reality. But the problem is this actually pushes more into the shadow, because as I've said before, the shadow is the disowned parts of ourselves. So now it's even getting worse, because if you're feeling sad, you're like, no, I'm not supposed to feel sad. And then you suppress that, and that goes and it sits in the shadow. Now, as I've said before, Jung said, if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. So that is the true law of attraction, if you want to put it that way, right? And the ego would want to manipulate this, but actually we could learn from the Taoists. They talk about Wei Wu Wei, which is the action of non-action, letting go, trusting the process, trusting the universe, and let go, right? Try not to manipulate our emotions, manipulate our reactions, because that in itself stems from a shadow aspect, right? Which is the part of us that doesn't trust, right? That thinks we need to control all of this. So that was high vibe, right? So how does one alchemize, and how can one be high vibe? So authenticity is the highest vibration. We've spoken about this. Not love, authenticity. So being high vibe actually has to do with your frame of reference. And this is not just a positive frame of reference. The more you read, the more you learn, the more you synthesize, the more your paradigm expands. And the more your paradigm expands, the more you understand what this reality is. The more you understand what this reality is, the more you can carry opposites within your field. So I probably have to give an example here, right? If you've got a small frame of reference still, and you view everything in terms of black and white, right and wrong, if somebody hurts you, you will see them as bad and yourself as good. Also, you don't really have an idea why bad happens, because in your worldview, bad should not happen, right? Good is better than bad. So why does bad happen? When you read and you realize that this is a learning school, that we're not here necessarily to be happy, but to grow and expand, and you learn about soul contracts, and you learn about designated assholes that incarnate, and that they're a part of you that shows you to yourself. Now, from this perspective, all of a sudden, you can use the experience to grow. And you can now have two things be true. Firstly, what that person did was not acceptable, but also they are part of God, and this needed to happen. So from a higher perspective, you can now hold the opposites. And because you can hold the opposites, you can have boundaries without going into victim consciousness, right? And you can be authentic about your boundaries. And this is, what's the word? This is a higher frequency, right? Authentic, higher frequency. My arm's getting tired. So let's look at alchemy. Alchemy would be transmuting trauma into realization, boundaries, love, self-love, right? And empowerment. So I think what the archons did by sort of infiltrating the law of attraction with the secret and prosperity religion is they kept us from ourselves. They kept us from our authentic selves, because alchemy absolutely starts with feeling what you're feeling. If you're angry, you really have to feel that anger. And remember, anger is always sadness suppressed. But you have to feel the anger before you can get to the sadness. And this is the thing, emotions always open up to other emotions. So I'm not saying get stuck. Victim consciousness, isn't a good thing. Some people actually make their experiences and their wounds their entire badge of honor, and it becomes a part of their ego identity, and this is an issue. I'm not talking about this kind of thing, right? I'm talking about when something hurts you, to have the guts to face the monster, look at it, feel it, right? Be with it, without trying to analyze it, without trying to change it. Because if you do this, if you try to change an emotion immediately, or if you suppress it, it sits in your shadow. It goes to the disowned parts of yourself, and you will project it onto other people. And what would happen then is the same pattern will repeat itself over and over and over and over again, because you have not looked at the emotions, you have not looked at the reality. So let's say you have a disappointment, a big let's say love disappointment, right? If you do that thing of, people saying get under somebody to get over somebody else, if you just jump into another relationship, you are pushing everything into the shadow. And you might feel better initially, but in the long run, the same pattern is just going to show itself, because you have not made the unconscious conscious, and therefore it is ruling your life, and you are calling it fate. If you start to realize that you have patterns in your life, and that this is not the first time that this is happening, it is incumbent upon you to then go and to look at this, right? So this is not victim shaming, but there's always something within you that is a match to this, right? It might be the fact that you don't truly love yourself. It might be the fact that you really need approval from other people. And, as my one friend once said, the main indicator of a childhood abandonment wound is looking for love in people who do not have the capacity to give it to you in your adult life, right? So it's very complex, but the only way we can see it is if we sit with it. So, okay, how do we alchemize? We sit with the emotion, right? We just feel it without trying to analyze it at first. And it's going to be like the blue fire, right? So the Buddhists talk about the blue fire that burns everything away that is not in alignment with it. So it's going to be really uncomfortable, sad, whatever comes up, to really feel that and to give it its due, because that is your inner child feeling those emotions. And as a child, you suppressed your emotions in order to be more socially palatable, in order to get validation, right? It's normal, we all do it. And unfortunately, that residue sat in your field, and it is creating your reality. So now you have to go give that child the voice. You have to be a witness to that child without crying with the child. What I mean is, the child doesn't fix you, right? It's up to you to fix the child, or not fix. Fix is the wrong word. To help the child to heal herself. So you sit with the emotion, and you feel it, right? With compassion, with love. You express it. You allow it to have space. And then you also can allow yourself to vent, right? But once you've vented, you have to look at the mirror. You have to look at, where does this come from? How many times have I seen this? And what part in myself does not love myself enough? And then when you see that everything happens for you, nothing happens to you, you can start to understand that even this is a gift, right? It's fierce grace, because it's you showing you to yourself. And if you can look at that without judgment, right? But with compassion and with love, then that even leads to forgiveness towards the person in the mirror, right? The person in the outside world that reflected that to you, right? If it's an abusive relationship, it doesn't mean that you're taking the person back, but you can realize that wounded people wound people. And then you can realize that healed people also heal people. You're not going to try and heal wounded people, by the way. You're only going to heal yourself. And when you sit with this, you can really go into the psyche with the help of dreams, with the help of synchronicity, with the help of silence and complete surrender, acceptance, and love. It'll be shown to you what this whole thing is about, right? And then you go into the shadow and you get the gold. And the gold is probably something beautiful that you've suppressed as well, right? It's also the realization of who and what you are beyond this suppression. And then eventually you can look back at this experience and be grateful for it, because it brought you to a higher level of empowerment. So I hope that that helps. I also do shadow work for people. If any of you are ever interested, throw me a note. And if you have more questions about this, ask in the comments. Have a lovely day.